Good day. We are from Group 6. Today we're going to present about the transportation sector. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our group members who are ETHAR, Rashvini, GEETHA, HARDESH, BAVEETHERAN and myself SHEEVANNEE. As a matter of fact, we can't deny that energy is a vital requirement for transportation, one of the key infrastructures for economic growth. The transportation sector is a category that provides services such as the movement of people and goods, which is a significant economic sector. Many nations are under intense pressure to control massive air pollution and greenhouse gas emission while sustaining strong economic growth as a result of speeding up industrialization, global transportation, and urbanization. Different sectors in the world are responsible for carbon dioxide emission. One of the main causes of greenhouse gas emission is the transportation industry. Because the large portion of transportation energy demand is met by fossil fuels, data shows that the transportation industry is one of the world's largest producers of CO2 emissions. It is one of the most promptly expanding global warming and climate change sources. In 2020, the worldwide transportation sector generated over 7.3 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide emission, making it one of the worst polluters. With 41% of the transportation-related emissions that year, passenger automobiles were the main sources of emissions. At the same time, the number of passenger automobiles in the world continues to increase at an exponential rate. Therefore, the purpose of this study is to propose a sustainable decision support system that can be deployed via ICT to implement optimal transportation to reduce the CO2 emission while reducing carbon footprint. Problem statement. The transportation sector contributes the most amount of carbon footprint in the economic sector, which causes climate change by trapping heat, and they also contribute to respiratory diseases from air pollution. Multiple effects of transportation on the environment. Emissions are a factor in both air pollution and climate change, while noise poses health problems. Transport has other negative effects on society that are very serious, in addition to these effects on the environment. The high CO2 emissions from the transport need to be reduced to avoid any wildfire and other climate changes caused by the greenhouse gases. There is a conspicuous dearth of well-structured policy guidelines to make use of the usage of information and communication technology in the mobility sector. This matter is quite serious because based on the data that's collected, the carbon footprint released by the transportation sector takes one of the top 3 spots of the highest CO2 emissions. That's all from me. Next, I would like to pass it to my friend Rashvini. Thank you.
Thank you, Shivani. People who live in developed countries are primarily impacted by the high carbon emission from the automobile activities because of the frequent transportation activities that take place there. An investigation conducted by the International Council on Clean Transportation in 2018 found that the average American emits about 386 kilos of carbon dioxide annually. The environmental physiological effects of greenhouse gases on people and animals are extensive. By trapping heat, they contribute to climate change and respiratory diseases brought on by air pollution and smoke. Other influence of climate change brought on by greenhouse gases include extreme weather, interruption in the food supply, and increase in the wildfire. Next slide. What causes the problem? The transportation vehicles contributed on 1/5 of worldwide carbon CO2 emission. The table shows that the majority, 74.5% of transport emission, come from road vehicles, which cause a lot of CO2 emission. Slide. Transportation GDP. GDP is stated by known as gross domestic product. There's a positive or significant association between transportation carbon to emission and the transportation of GDP workers. They demonstrate the rights of 1% of GDP workers may increase carbon emission in this industry. Next, vehicle ownership. Vehicle ownership is the primary source of carbon to emission in the road transport sector. For example, the average passenger vehicle emits about 404 grams of carbon 2 per mile. High consumption of fossil fuels. High consumption of fossil fuels in the transportation sector results in carbon 2 emission even in the long run for most countries. That's all from me. I'll pass it to ETHAR.
Impact of the problem. First one is pollutants and air quality. Air pollutants are compounds that have a negative impact on the environment by distributing the psychology of plants, animal, and entire ecosystem, as well as human property, such as crops grown for human consumption or artificial structure. We place climate at the top of the list because it has been determined that it's one of the most significant environmental concerns that humanity will confront in the 21st century. Second is change in food supply. Weather variation have an impact on agriculture and the production of food for people. The growing condition for food crops have changed in many regions due to change in precipitation and temperature caused by carbon emission. According to the US Global Change Research Program, food food costs will increase worldwide as a result of significant change in crop yield. Third, climate change. Climate change is the consequences of carbon emission that have the most negative impact of the environment. It is the most important global issue of 21st century, and as will be seen below, its determined effects are felt in a variety contexts that generation of power, the burning of fossil fuels for energy, waste management in commercial and residential settings, and food production all produce greenhouse gases. These gases contribute to global warming by producing the greenhouse effect and thermal infrared radiation, which traps heat in the atmosphere. Fourth, geographical changes. At the end of the last ice age, temperature was only 2.5 to 5 degrees Celsius colder than current temperature, but parts of the United States were covered in thousands of feet of ice. According to NASA, even a small temperature change can have a significant impact on the environment. Over the next 100 years, the world temperature are expected to climb by about 1.5 degrees Celsius, according to Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Fifth is acid rain. Another negative effect of raising CO2 emissions in the atmosphere brought on by human activity in the acid rain. Large amounts of sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide are released into the atmosphere as a result of fossil fuels bringing birds in power plants. Humans are not at risk when walking through acid rains. However, a major issue arose when SO2 and NOx react with silver and nitrate particles in the atmosphere. It has an impact on people by creating cancer and respiratory conditions like asthma and bronchitis. Finally, coastal and ocean acidification. The environmental effects of carbon footprint are felt on various surfaces since the Earth is a connected system. Acidity poses a serious threat to aquatic ecosystem. Aluminum, silver, and nitrogen are among the pollutants that can be released into streams, lakes, and deep waterways due to our existing waste treatment procedures. This has a major impact on aquatic life. The environment becomes more acidic and the effects worsen as more chemicals are released. Thank you, and I will pass it to HARDESH.
Thank you, ETHAR. So next is the current solutions. So there are 4 current solutions. One of it is complementary between ICTs and freight transport. Another intriguing discovery is the role of complementary between ICTs and freight transport operations in improving environmentally equality. Despite its unanticipated impact, the interplay between new technologies and the transportation industry is critical for significantly reducing CO2 emissions from freight transport operations. Next is the energy efficiency. Energy efficiency improvement is also an effective policy in reducing energy consumption and CO2 emission in energy-intensive sectors such as the transport sector. It reveals that the removal of energy subsidies is effective in reducing energy consumption and consequently carbon dioxide emissions in the transport sector as at the low levels. Next is the electric vehicles. Many studies suggest that use of electric vehicles in the fleet to reduce energy consumption and consequently carbon dioxide emissions in the transport sector. Others introduce carbon and energy tax policies believes that environmental taxes, research and development subsidies, and investment in clean infrastructure, as well as international agreements can reduce transport-related CO2 emissions. The fourth one is urbanization. They found that urbanization compared to the other variables has the lowest impact on the increase in CO2 emissions from Chinese transport. Andres and Padilla showed that population and energy intensity of transport in comparison with GDP of transport is more important to explain the CO2 emission of transport. Next slide. Next is the inefficiency of the current solution. So there are 3. Let's start with energy efficiency. The high expense of enforcement is one of the most prevalent problems with an energy efficient design. Even while such vehicles take more money to make and plan, the additional expenses are offset by the reduction in energy use. Therefore, the criticism of the increased cost is valid. Additionally, manufacturing supplies are not always readily available, and the environmental issue is the most obvious drawback of the energy efficient architecture. Next is urbanization. Congestion in the traffic and a lack of parking. Today, cities are home to 50% of the world's population, and they are expanding by an average of 2 to 3% annually. Urban commuters spend over 46 hours a year delay in traffic, according to recent research. Although cities' economies benefit from population increase, it frequently puts pressure on their transportation infrastructure. Furthermore, lack of public transportation, cities expand their public transportation system as well as their highways. Public transit routes and capacity must alter as commercial and residential areas do. A sudden inflow of additional residents can swiftly modify the situation where a few routes could once accommodate rider demand. Lastly is the electric vehicles. Purchasing an electric automobile might be costly. So electric automobiles do typically cost more to buy than gasoline or diesel power counterparts. The battery, which is the most expensive component of an electric vehicle, in addition, producing electric vehicles increases pollution. You need to look at the sourcing and manufacturing processes for an electric car components to get a true picture of the number of greenhouse gases produced throughout production. So that's all from me. Next, I would like to pass it to my friend BAVEETHERAN. Thank you.
Thank you, Hardesh. I would like to explain the proposed solution. A normal vehicle emits greenhouse greenhouse gases GHG, which give a negative impact of human health and also the environment. So the reduced carbon emissions, we can use the help of ICTs. All type of vehicle release carbon emissions. To avoid that, we can come up with a solution which is create an application CO2 emission tracker that all the vehicle user on the road will have to download and register. Once they download it, they will have to connect the app with their vehicle using Bluetooth. For the vehicle user to know the amount of carbon emission from their vehicle, they need to have a carbon sensor or detector that should be built into the vehicle itself. A carbon dioxide CO2 sensor is a tool used to gauge the atmosphere carbon dioxide concentrations. The sensor is designed with criteria used in vehicles in mind and intended for automotive application. The sensor simultaneously measure the measurement of CO2 emission from cars. The sensor is made up of a unique tiny sensor unit with built-in electronics. It utilizes particular physical and chemical phenomena to convert the consistency and concentrations of different gases into conventional electrical signal. It will analyze the CO2 emission and alert the vehicle for optimal carbon emission. For example, a person drives a particular vehicle for a certain long distance. If that car has a high number of CO2 emissions, it will notify the vehicle driver or user via the application to stop the vehicle. The vehicle will slowly stop by the driver or user to prevent more emissions. After a certain amount of time, the percentage of carbon emission is low, the app will notify the driver or user to continue driving. Moreover, the application can also be instrumental in providing information on climate change and disaster management. This application also will connected to the geology and meteorology department to send information regarding the carbon emission by each vehicle that is registered in application. If there is an excess amount of carbon emitted by the vehicle driver or user, the department that is in charge will take action against them. Next slide. The CO system, the CO2 emission tracking system will ask the user to enter the vehicle details. After that, the vehicle and user details will be saved in application. The climate details and carbon emission limit will be shown to the user or driver. If the carbon emission percentage is high, it will show send message to driver to stop the vehicle. If the carbon emission percentage is low, it will show send message to driver to continue driving the vehicle. Next slide. How does the proposed solution alleviate to or solve the identified problem? By using this unique solution, it will help to solve the problem by using terms in ICT technology that is applied. Before using this application, the transportation of atmospheric pollutants like carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen oxide was produced. Using this term will help reduce more CO2 emissions and save the environment. This application will be a compulsory for every vehicle driver or user who will have to download and register. When they have registered in the application, they will have to add their personal information to the application. This application will also be able to calculate and track the percentage of the carbon emission in the nearby area where the driver will be driving and notify the vehicle user or driver either to stop driving if the percentage is high or continue driving if it's low. For example, if the application asks the driver to stop and the driver still doesn't do it, the application will send a complaint to the department that is in charge so that they will be able to take action. With this, the driver will have to follow it and it will help to reduce carbon emission. That's all from me. Next, I would like to pass to my friend Geetha.
Thank you, Baveetharan. How is the problem superior to the current solution? The problem is superior to currently available solution because most of the solutions require a lot of time and funding for research and testing, especially for making more efficient electrical vehicles and making more sustainable fuel while making a system as proposed will like take more testing and building the system itself. Another reason why the problem is superior to the current solution as the currently used solution focuses more on reducing energy consumption. Furthermore, lithium is the lightest metal and lightest solid element under the normal circuitries. It extensively uses in the batteries for electrical vehicles. Beryllium is the most significant known reserves in the world. Along with the conductive non-metal gravitative, other metals are utilized in the electrical vehicles such as nickel, copper, aluminum, cobalt, and occasionally manganese. It will be difficult to produce a significant number of electrical vehicles due to the lack of factories and sufficient of the lithium supplies for making batteries. Developing electric vehicles produces more pollution. We need to look for the sourcing and manufacturing processes for the electrical cars components to get a specific representation for the number of greenhouse gases produced throughout the production. Mining the raw minerals required to make the car produces a significant number of greenhouse emissions. Next slide. What resources and expertise are required to develop the system? To construct this system, several different tools and facilities will be required. Strong, quick, and secure internet access is required as well as powerful computer. Most likely a supercomputer to process the large amount of data coming. The computer also need a highly secure cybersecurity system to guard against the system hacking and or sabotage. A device that reacts to the physical streamers such as sensor is also necessary to track the usage of vehicles and the CO2 emission. In terms of the expertise required to develop the system, the resources indicate that there is need for software development expert to develop the system itself. Database management expert to help how to sort the data and manage the results. An AI creation expert, especially in machine learning, to passively improve on the system and reduce the repeating errors. Cybersecurity system expert to create a system that will be safe from external attacks on the system. Meteorologists and geologistic experts provide insight effects of weather condition as well as ground conditions respectively. Finally, an expert on vehicles who can give his input on vehicles specifications, especially on fuel consumption. That's all from us and thank you.